Hi, I'm David Penn, research analyst with Finovate, and joining me today is Vincent Bezemer. He is the SVP of Americas with Backbase. We're going to talk a little bit about the work that Vincent does with Backbase, as well as the work that Backbase does in the world of digital banking. So first, Vincent, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, David.
Excellent. How are you doing today, by the way? Might as well ask.
I can't complain. Hope you're doing well too.
Fantastic, fantastic. Before we get started about all of the work that Backbase does, I thought maybe we would start off just a little bit with your relationship to Backbase and the work, again, that you do for them as SVP of Americas.
Yeah, I'd love to. My name is Vincent Bezemer. I've been with Backbase for about 6 years now, but pretty much spent my whole career in the customer experience realm. Initially more on the .com website, where I started selling to companies like an American Express and Wells Fargo and Nordstrom, and really got a clear understanding of like how there are these differences between e-commerce and online banking, for instance, and banking institutions at large, and that really fascinated me. So when I got the opportunity to join Backbase and really focus on the financial institutions, that was really amazing to me, because I could bring all that knowledge from the marketing side of things to the financial sector. At Backbase, I had the privilege of working with institutions like Navy Federal, Royal Bank of Canada, and many others, and they've taught me a lot about the U.S. environment. And as you can hear by my accent, I'm Dutch, so I'm trying to kind of blend a world's perspective on banking and really make it actionable for our customers here in North America.
Well, very, very interesting. I can imagine with your background in customer experience, that's something that comes quite in handy these days as we talk about what's going on in banking. Particularly, I think about how Backbase likes to think of itself as a company that can help banks become the bank that people love. And that might strike odd to some people, the idea of loving a bank. I wonder if you could talk a little about that love-hate relationship that people have with banks, and what is Backbase doing to maybe address this a little bit?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I think first and foremost, you obviously have to understand who your clientele really is, right? And let's face it, most institutions have an aging clientele. And that is really not indicative of what the future of banking should look like, right? Because there is this digital divide. And I think once you start to understand that there is this need for self-directiveness, there is a large part of your population, also inclusive of all the demographics, that simply do not want to engage with a person. And if they engage, they want to engage on their own terms. So I think supporting that self-directiveness, but really give our customers, the banks and the credit unions, the tools to compete in kind of an omni-channel fashion when it comes to digital. So your experience on mobile, web should all be the same, but also the processes should be the same, right? So whether I am in a collection cycle, or whether I'm in a self-service cycle, or maybe when I'm originating products, I want those experiences to be the same. And if I need help, because I'm either in an edge case type of scenario, that your team member, the bank's team member, actually sees that same view that I as a customer have seen, and they can help me with as little friction as possible. So the key words really to become the bank that people love is, do you support self-directiveness, and do you have a relentless focus on removing both external and internal friction that creates smooth processes?
Very interesting. I really appreciate the point that you make about that challenge on the one side of banks having an aging clientele, as an aging client myself, and at the same time having all of these millennials coming on who are making demands for different services and things like that, and just figuring out how banks juggle those two differences. Speaking of differences, I can imagine another that I know in fintech we often gloss over, but is very, very important, and that's the difference between your huge tier one big financial institutions on the one side that are very much innovating, and then the needs of community banks and credit unions who also have strong innovation needs for their customers. How do you deal with that divide? How do you deal with the difference in serving those different types of businesses?
Yeah, we approach both sizes of our customer base from the same principal point, that is that we are a platform, right? As much as Amazon is an e-commerce platform, and Netflix is a content platform, and Uber is a mobility platform, we really approach it from a banking platform perspective. And what you see here is that in our proposition, you can take the platform as is and build on top of that, right? Which is what a lot of tier ones want to do, right? They have built everything themselves. They basically had unlimited innovation power, but they saw that like 80% of that IT budget was there to basically keep the legacy systems afloat, right? So they're now seeing that, hey, this platform, all these non-functionals, whether it's from an auditing or security or entitlements perspective, why don't we just outsource that? Why don't we just get a product in with a roadmap that is supported by hundreds or thousands of people in the Backbase ecosystem, so that we don't have to worry about that anymore, and we can apply our resources to actually create the experiences and the innovations that matter in our competitive landscape, where our smaller institutions can actually take that same platform, but we have accelerators on top of that. And these accelerators, if you like them out of the box, can get you to market really fast. But taking all these learnings that we have from all the institutions across the world, so knowing that you really have a true stable and scalable and innovative environment, but still with the option for a smaller institution to say, okay, 80% of this journey I like, but here I just quickly want to tweak this because I don't want to look like the next bank down the street, for instance, right? So I think having a platform notion, offering this platform to its fullest details to our customers, but packaging it more into ready-to-go offerings when it comes to omni-channel digital banking, or to origination, or self-service, or lending, secured, unsecured lending products. Yeah, we can service both markets there.
Yeah, interesting. It's interesting. You talk about platformization, and I know that certainly pre-COVID, one of the most common things you heard in financial service and fintech was the idea of the importance of platforms. That concept borrowed over from big tech that you mentioned. You can see in your explanation just how applicable and how important that idea of being able to provide a platform is to be able to reach those different sorts of markets. Another buzzword that was really pretty hot before COVID was personalization. And I can imagine with your customer experience background, that's something you've paid quite a bit of attention to in your career. Could you maybe define personalization, especially in the context of financial services, and some of the things that Backbase is doing to bring that to bear?
Yeah, I think in financial sector specifically, personalization falls in two categories, right? So one, do you understand your customer? Do you understand the moments of truth that matter to that customer when they start engaging with you for a certain product? That's one part of it. And this is where, market data, behavioral data, any type of database that you can procure can really help you have that understanding. But then the second set of personalization, this is really more mass personalization. Can you give your prospective customer, but also existing customers, the feeling that they can kind of tweak the products just ever so slightly? Because if you can, you're relating more with the needs of that person. So it's personalization in the top of the funnel and driving them to that moment of truth where you want to be there for them. And then subsequently also, how are you really going to create that process so that the customer feels that you truly listened and that they can make those small customizations. And really what you need for that is to understand that a true modern architecture that enables that is one that is far more horizontal than what we have approached, right? A lot of banks have approached it from a line of business type of perspective, right? Like, I need to modernize my wealth. Let's go out to the market for a wealth solution, right? And then 2 years later, it's commercial banking, for instance. And I think this is really where that platform play comes into play, where you can say, okay, now I'm slowly tilting these silos into this horizontal architecture. I got my foundational platform that sits directly on top of my core, that has all the business logic in there, and then that layer can power all my different lines of businesses and all the processes that we have within those lines of businesses. So Backbase is indeed that layer that sits directly on top of your core, and we can provide that end-to-end across all lines of businesses and processes. So it's I think once you have that notion of a clean architecture, modern technologies, you now can start plug and playing in some of these fintech providers that have either amazing data sets or amazing approaches to frictionless banking. And you can start experimenting with that faster because you're freeing up your resources, right? Remember, they don't have to manage that platform anymore. They can just focus on the things that truly make a difference and moves the needle.
Yeah, interesting. I really appreciated the distinction that you made about the two types of personalization, because I do feel that a lot of times, understandably, when we talk about personalization, we focus on the first one, the things that banks and fintechs and so forth can do. But I really have not heard very much conversation at all about the idea of including elements that allow the customer themselves to bring some of that customization, to add some of that personalization. I thought that was a really, really excellent insight that you added there.
Thank you.
I wanted to finish up maybe with one question. It sort of touches a little bit on this platform, which is sort of this concept we've got from big tech, the Amazons of the world. And it has to do with the encroachment, if you will, of big tech into the financial world, with all of, as you mentioned, their powers and capacities to innovate, their proven innovations, the fact that they've got a lot of ways of doing things that people love and would like to see banks emulate. What can you tell us about your sense of the threat that big tech represents to financial services in terms of the adjustments they'll have to make and some of the things that financial services companies, fintech, should be thinking about going down the line toward the future?
Yeah, that's a really big question, of course, David, and I wish I had the answer. But I think from a Backbase perspective, we just have a couple of guiding principles, right? And the first principle is obviously platform that we already discussed. I think second is, if you continue to drive the best experience and be relentless on it, right? Not just for your prospective customers or members and your existing customer base, but also for your own team members, right? If you're relentlessly focused on that, you will be eventually in the leading category, right? I think another part also has to do with how do you really manage your cost efficiency ratios, right? And that may be a little bit of an unexpected term from a digital experience software vendor, but I think if you tally up all the different solutions that you have in your ecosystem and what those yearly costs are, then you can start to understand that tilting those silos into a horizontal product stack that can power all the digital capabilities of your institution will be simply more cost effective, period. There's no question about it. Data shows it, ROI models show it. So having that strategy where you're solving a point challenge, whether it's wealth management or commerce or entitlements or money movement, solve that. But in the back of your mind, say, am I solving this in a horizontal platform type of notion? Because if you do that correctly, you can bring down your cost efficiency ratios. And really, that's the part that you're competing against. You're not really competing against these big tech platforms. You're not really competing against the experiences or the market reach. You're competing because they have a cost base of 15 and you have a cost base of 60, right? And that gap allows them to put a lot more marketing dollars behind it, right? So just acquiring and merging is not the only answer in fighting off the big tech in the future. It's being relentless on the experience you're offering, knowing your customer, knowing your market, knowing your territory, being there at the moment of truth, right? Like we already discussed, and subsequently driving down your cost base so that you can actually compete from that perspective and free up the money to fight the marketing power that these big tech companies have. So that has been our stance for the last couple of years. I don't see that significantly changing. Always love to engage in dialogue with whomever wants to reach out to me, because I'm still learning, as you can imagine. But yeah, just be relentlessly focused on what you're offering, and I think you can compete.
Yeah. Excellent. Maybe still learning, but quite a bit of wisdom. And again, that last remark I thought that you made, don't fear the big tech. Focus on your own situation, focus on your own cost efficiencies, and that will do a lot of the work that you think that you need to do in worrying about Microsoft or Apple. Again, I think that's extremely helpful and very wise advice for companies, especially maybe young companies who think that the first thing they've got this big tech company in their eyes, and it's like, don't worry about them, worry about yourself.
Yeah, I think, there's a saying in the Netherlands, and I won't translate it, but it roughly means that, if somebody's slicing the pie, right, how big of a slice do you want, and where are the crumbles, right? And what I feel with these big tech companies is maybe a little bit of a weird analogy, right? But what I think with these large companies, whether it's a lifestyle company or a big tech company, they're creating awareness in the market. Hey, this is how deposits can look, or hey, this is how a credit card experience can be, or this is how an e-wallet should be. And that if you can now understand who is interested in that, then I think those big tech companies, they will focus on commonality because that's how they scale. But they will still leave piece of the pie on the table for you, or the crumbs if you're interested in that play. And then it becomes really important, like, do we understand that moment of truth, and are we there at the right time?
Excellent, excellent. Well, thank you very much for spending some time with us again. I thought you made some very insightful comments about banking in general, about the work that Backbase does, and some things I think our listeners and viewers can keep in mind going forward here in 2021, a year of all kinds of new challenges. So thanks again very much for joining us, and I look forward to talking with you again.
Same here, David. Thank you.
Fantastic. Have a great day, and thank you all for joining us as well.